Hi everyone, I'm Scott McCracken, I'm the gallery manager here at Turps. Thank you all for coming today to our artist talk. We've been joined by the three exhibiting artists, Nelson Diplexcito at the far end, these are his paintings here, Howard Rogers on this wall here, and Jay Clark, whose work is on this wall. So for today, what we thought, rather than being a sort of standard artist talk where the artists just talk to you, we would try and have a sort of open forum where you can ask any questions that you may have. Those that have seen the show, those that have read the catalogue, if you've got any questions that you want to put to the guys, this is your chance. The talk will last maybe about 45 minutes to an hour. After that time, the gallery will stay open until 5 PM, so if you've not seen the show, you have a chance to. And also, just so everyone's aware, we are recording the talk, so it will be made available online in a few weeks' time. So, let's kick off. Does anyone have any questions, any burning questions that they want to put to any three of the...
It was just about what I thought about all these three artists is how they use the image in relationship to time. And just to go through each very, very briefly, I think with Nelson's work, his image is capturing something instantaneous that's deriving from his experience with film and photography. And although no painting is made instantaneously, it is a way of capturing an instantaneous moment. So its relationship to time is something which you could say is a very precise moment in time. In contrast, Howard is really kind of, I believe, I'm not sure you can talk about it, but it's sort of finding an image through the process of painting. So it's not something that is caught immediately, but it's built up, found, maybe discarded, changed, and so forth. And then with Jake, his relationship with time maybe is slightly different. He's placing it within a time. For me, it's like a sort of early 60s photography, and I think you've mentioned in the catalogue about sort of various forms of architecture and an interest in certain kind of aesthetic. So you're placing it within a sort of an aesthetic time, so giving it a kind of characteristic which relates to a historical time. So in a way, all three painters, although they're all using imagery, are using that imagery in relationship to time in very, very different ways. So I wonder if you could kind of elaborate on that. All at once.
Well, I think, on the most obvious level, I think all of us believe that painting is a time activity. That it's something that takes time, not only to make but also to read. And the time invested in the making reads in the painting, if you like. And I think that's, well, certainly to me, but I think that's one of the things that we share as a sort of like why we feel that painting is so important and so real to us, that somehow it is a mirror of our time, whatever that might be, and that in a weird way we can slow it down, speed it up, we can become part of it, or essentially in the end we remove ourselves from it. And painting is an incredible vehicle, I think, for doing that, especially, he says, in a time that is all about speed. I won't get into that too obviously, but everything now is about fast time, fast track. The whole processes that involve with a lot of art now are about instantaneous grabs of everything, and without at all sounding, I think, in any sense reactionary. I'm not particularly interested in that. I don't think it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in the world that I inhabit myself, inside myself, and outside myself.
So you're saying painting slows time?
Yeah, I think it's better than drugs in that sense. Yeah, it slows time, and you're still in control in one sense or another, which is different from drugs. So. Yeah, it does, and we all know that when you read a painting, good paintings you can come back to and read again and again and again, and the paintings that you come back to and you already know them, or you're bored with what you've read, You know, they don't have
Yeah.
that quality.
Yeah, also I think three of us, we came about the show with we did these studio visits, but there was the idea, we've been in our studios for a long time as well up to that point, you know, we've been at least, we've been in your studio for, what, 20 years?
Yeah.
You know, so there's something about being in this space and the idea that, you know, you develop work within that space and that kind of, you kind of need that stability and that time. And there's a lot to do with that really. And, you know, the idea, a lot of people, you know, I'm getting in studio, you know, you get in studio another year and you get studio 6 months and you go in residency and you're doing this, but I think the three of us, we had these long-term studio lets, and I think that was kind of quite important to kind of carry to the show, and the idea of, at this time, kind of like, the idea is coming out of that really, more than a sort of a travel thing or a kind of short thing, but it was like, you know, a long time, a longevity in the space, and then, you know, the ideas came out of that really, you know, came out almost like the nothingness of the studio. And
I think it was important, just to say, because we said it in the catalogue, that we basically the show came about because we did that thing which everyone is supposed to do, but hardly anyone does, and then we just started to say, hey, do you mind if we come around the studio and have a look at some work? And so last year we started to just do these occasional studio visits where we just turn up and look at some work and just talk about things generally. And in a funny way, the show, that again is about time.
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing is that we all have enough respect for each other to know that we are in it for the long term. Slightly shorter term than me now, but so that we're not sort of, in a way, we're not in a race anymore. There's no race. You know, it's.
Yeah, there was also a kind of, I suppose you'd say, there's kind of urgency also, you know, you see, we're working against the clock, we're on the clock all the time. That sounds a little desperate, but it's true. We're on the clock, and there is that kind of urgency of making paintings, you know. That seems really important. I mean, going back to Dave's question about film and photography, I did work with film and photography for 10 years. And what I particularly like, how I moved back into painting, I was a painter initially, left painting to work with photography and film, came back to painting. But what I particularly was interested in, I think, in making paintings was the condensement of time. Where time could somehow be kind of put down. A film always seemed to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, you know. And then, you know, if you read things like Laura Mulvey's Death 24 Times a Second, you know, the idea that film can be interrupted, you know, that it can be stopped, and the temporal nature of it can be taken away from it. You know, the actual time span of it can actually be stopped. You can go away, make a cup of tea, or something like that. And in a way, I wasn't very keen on that particular idea, that, you know, so that I think the one single image seemed to be very, very important, one that would kind of stay and remain in stasis.
Just one other thing about time maybe, and that was that, you know, I mean, I have spent a lot of time in the past, if you like, being concerned, worrying in a way about narrative, about what narrative is, whether I can actually have a narrative, you know, whether a narrative is meaningful, etc., 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 and made endless paintings, trying to, in a way, to discover a narrative for myself. I suppose what's happened over the last maybe 5 or 6 years is like I sort of came to the conclusion, as I said in that catalogue thing, that, you know, maybe after a certain point, meaning is bred in the bone. That it's like we have to access it rather than necessarily be putting it in there all the time. And so that's why personally I came back to painting. I've never really used photographs at all, but I came back to painting the objects, things mainly that were around me, that in the studio. So I would start from an object, mainly flowers to start with, but then books and other things came in. And then what I tended to find was, to me, that if you like, because painting is part of a massive history, because that's what it is, because, you know, it's like culturally goes backwards all the time, that somehow you couldn't help but be in that time. You couldn't help but, like, and in that sense it's fantastic. It's amazing to have that continuum and to feel that somehow one is still part of that. And therefore, in a funny sense, and again it's another thing, the whole idea of busting out of it, breaking out of it, and, you know, doing all these things, like smash it or whatever, you know, maybe I'm obviously about 60 years too late to do any of those things. But you know, I don't have any desire for it. One last little thing of that. I was in Paris last week, and I went to the museum, the Picasso Museum, and there were two images which I saw there. Which one was a 1906 self-portrait of Picasso, very simple, very bold, and you think of 90. And one was one that he did when he was 90, one of the Musketeers, and these paintings bridged a whole life, but they were joined in a really like serious way. And again, I think that's to me what painting is. That's what it does. And nothing else I know does that.
Yes, it's almost like a cumulative thing.
Yeah.
That all the experience and
Yeah.
mistakes, all those things are sort of
Yeah.
adding to the next
And
painting.
they weren't the same. It wasn't
Yeah.
like you say, oh,
Yeah.
so
But there's always a sort of thread, I think, from
Yeah.
the very first thing you
Yeah.
start doing with the medium to
Yeah.
what you're doing now. Hopefully there's, you know,
yeah.
it's still connected to that.
Yeah,
you know, what
absolutely.
you first started being interested in, you know, structure, whatever it is, you know, there's
Yeah.
always, you know, you can go, you know,
Yeah.
so there's not, you know, so
Yeah.
trying to change it.
And there's obviously a lot of young artists in this audience. I know because he's invited them all. And it's, you know, what is really interesting, I think, is that as you get older, you paint more pictures, you do more things. That becomes, that becomes really part of who you are and what you are. And you know, that's like the thing that you always have, never leaves you. That even if it's crap, or a lot of it's crap, it is. But it never leaves you, that sense that this is, and they're all part of the same game,
Yeah.
the same thing.
I mean, the issue of history, they were discussing that. I mean, one of the things I often hear is that painters don't make for very good collaborators, you know. But in fact, you know, I think painters are collaborating all the time. And they're collaborating in a sense with works that they've made before, but also works from history. So they're actually, I think they're excellent collaborators.
No, selfish collaborators.
Yeah, selfish collaborators.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about that, there's a kind of intensity, I think, when you're making work, and I'm kind of quoting, summarising Goethe here, but there's a kind of intense looking that thereby becomes a kind of way of producing work. There's a kind of intense looking after a long period where you actually, it becomes a kind of theory and a way to actually proceed and to make work. If you have enough time to devote to it and enough energy to devote to it, you know, there's a kind of looking that is so intense, it becomes a kind of form, your own particular form of practice.
Any other questions? I mean, should we?
Burble on.
Yeah.
I'm going to burble on a bit.
Okay.
Sorry. I mean, I think the other thing that often comes up when one's thinking about making paintings or something is this whole business between, you know, the public and the private again, between the publicness, the privateness that we've been talking about, the description of how you actually make things yourself in your studio, and then that whole public world that is so much part of, you know, the paraphernalia of being an artist, etc., etc. And well, I know myself, and I know Nelson has, and I can't speak necessarily for you, but I think you also, you know, have always felt a real, in a sense, a problem with that clashing of those two. It's never felt easy in the second world, if you see what I mean. And always found a conflict, a real conflict about, to me at least, the conflict goes back into the studio to some extent, because it does then question the nature of why. What the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this thing here? Which in a way, the fourth wall is something that you actually don't particularly like, you don't particularly value. And so all those sorts of questions, they can actually stop you painting. I know that in the past, so they're dangerous in that sense. But I do think they're also important questions for one to ask of the activity, so that you can keep it alive, so that you make sure that you're not just using it as an excuse or a way out, or
it can also be positive. It can be sort of feel.
it's what I mean.
Rage, which can make one paint.
Don't underestimate rage.
That's not a bad thing. You know?
Yeah, I think rage is
You're
good.
talking about the sort of external thing, but that can be, you know, you're talking about the negative. It can be a positive thing. You can react against it, or you can you can use that.
I think you always react, and you're right. I think rage is good. I mean, I think also disgust is good.
Yeah.
You know, I think artists should have a lot of disgust at the way things are and what happens and what happens to artworks themselves. And I think it doesn't, even though it's the centre of our lives and it's the thing that we want to do more than anything else. I think to have a disgust about it is perfectly healthy as well. I think we share that. Okay.
Howard?
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence in all three of your works of how paintings are constructed, and evident in the pentimenti of all three works. And it's interesting, like just the other day going to Jeff Elrod's show and going to see Bryce Marden's and seeing how the painter is trying to not paint the painting and then going to see Marden. Well, in a sense, Jeff Elrod, I think, is a good artist, good graphically, but he's he's producing a painting rather than painting the painting. And then you go and see Bryce Marden, and you've got this fantastically glaring contradiction. I just wonder what you think about the nature of these different approaches, because evidence of how you've come about these, all three of you, Nelson, Jake, and you, is so apparent. And what you think about artists that are not doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, someone I'm a big fan of is someone like Scheibitz, and I'd say that, maybe they're quite sort of, has a sort of freshness and cleanness about that, and the image is very much there, but how he's got to that, who knows, but there's something I like about that. So I do think certain work that is, without all the history and all the build-up to that, in evidence, is still, it's still a value, absolutely. I think three of us, maybe you can see all that process, but I think, personally I certainly do enjoy artists who, a lot of Guston's paintings, he just painted him, he won, but he would destroy a lot of work to get to that, but, that's...
But the evidence is still there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is and it isn't with Guston, but I think sometimes Guston, you get the impression he just painted in one, in one shot, True. I'd say the same with someone like Scheibitz, it's just one...
Yeah, although often with Scheibitz, he puts them away for 2 years and then brings them back out after working stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, with myself, a big renovation of my recent work is the idea of collage, and the idea of that is a sort of almost fast track to the image. So instead of building the image on the painting, which maybe saying how does more, I think with me the idea of the collage was almost like a quick way of getting to the image, and then when you paint it, you kind of gone ahead already on yourself. But then not painting it like Malcolm Morley and copying the collage, or Dexter Bell, where you copy the collage. It's more like the collage becomes the sort of beginning of, you've got something there to then work for, as opposed to a photograph, which is very different from a collage, I think, because a collage is already a photograph that's been, changed and transformed.
So the collage is a sort of reactive mechanism, like a stroke.
Yeah, the collage is like a drawing. The collage becomes what you base the painting on, for me anyway. But for me it's a big thing where the collage is already a painting process, because that's what I do with the collage. But so you're kind of going ahead a bit, and I think that's what's necessary. So when the painting, you're actually doing the painting, it's developed quite a bit already. I didn't really answer your question, Danny. So
Yeah. I know. I think that I paint a lot of pictures because I spend a lot of time in the studio, and a lot of the pictures I paint are they're almost painted not to be shown. They're painted not to work, and it sounds really weird. But I all my life I've tried to actually paint what I think are good, ugly pictures. And I've never succeeded, because if they're good, they're not ugly, and if they're ugly, they're not good. But I still have this desire to do it, so that quite often I make a lot of paintings, and they're mainly figure paintings, they're mainly paintings in green figure, that die a death in some horrific way. And yet the process of making those is what produces these that I have realised. So that in a curious way, my calmer moments, if you like, the sort of things, and I don't know again whether I'm answering your question or not, but the sort of things that happen in the other ones, the out of control things, the things that I have almost no technical control over, actually come back when they find an object that they can describe in some curious way. And then I sort of like make the painting, and then I like the way the painting is made, etc., etc. But then I dislike what it is. I dislike what it's portraying, because then I think, well, no, I should be able to do this with the one that got away. And so I'm always going back to the one that got away with the same technical tools that I've learned again, but somehow fucking it up. And it seems to be a sort of circle at the moment, which I still think I've got a few years to break out of. And yet, the same way, when I, again, like for instance, when I look at those late Picasso paintings, you know, and I just see someone who, like, you know, I mean, he never, I mean, okay, from beginning to end, the line is that he could draw, like fuck, you know. And so that everything on those late paintings is held in absolute tension on that surface, you know, however wild or crazy or whatever. Yet at the same time, he breaks his own rules all the time. He just smashes them all the time. And I just keep thinking, when I look at a painting done by him when he was 90, and I just keep thinking, well, there's hope for all of us. Well, not that we want to paint like him, because you can't. But there's hope that somehow we're not going to be trapped in the technique, or trapped in the notion of this makes a good painting, or that makes a bad painting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That somehow we can always break out of that trap.
Yeah.
And yeah, by doing it.
I mean, I have this kind of reoccurring dream that, you know, that I'll make a painting very, very quickly. You know, that I'll go from A to B and it'll be complete. You know, it'll be finished by next week or something like that. But it's very, very difficult. You know, what happens along the way is, you know, it doesn't move from A to B. There's these kind of strange things that happen to do with, you know, your ability or something like that, in order just to kind of construct the kind of painting. And often we find, I've gone too far, you know. I was like thinking about that Robert Frost thing. He's talking about poetry. You know, a good poem should be like ice on a hot stove riding on its own melting, you know. And I like that a lot. And you know, I think, oh, the painting's gone too far, you know, and then you have to pull it back. And that pulling back usually means a kind of major change. And that major change usually ends up with having a lot of the kinds of construction marks from previous paintings. In a sense, I don't want to kind of make that kind of full image somehow, a complete image, a kind of image somehow that should be kind of open, and yet, you know, not too closed. When the image closes down too much, that's when it becomes a problem for me. So that's probably why, just to answer your question, Danny, is probably why there's a lot of that kind of openness to sort of see the making of the work.
I think it's generous and genuine in all three of your works. You know, sometimes we can see people that try and affect a form of sort of history, you know, try and take a shortcut towards it, whereas within all three of you, drawing is at the source of it, and that revisionist nature of all of your approaches.
You almost need to do it. You almost need to do it to get to the right image, because you have to sort of go through the mistakes, and then you suddenly find.
Well, something that you can't actually conceive of at the onset.
Yeah.
And somehow it begins to just be visualised.
It's all those cliches again.
Yeah.
It's just not really knowing what you want, it's knowing what you don't want. You know, in a way, and you work towards what you want by eliminating all the things that you don't want, and then suddenly you go, oh shit, this must be it then. You know, and sometimes it is slightly in your face, and a bit of a shock.
Yeah, it's like you're tricking yourself in a way.
Yeah,
to get
but I think that's the part of
you need to go through all those
way of doing it.
things to get to that.
I mean, in a funny way, too much certainty is a death knell.
Yeah.
So tricking yourself is very good, and I think we do trick ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and we tell lies to ourselves all the time.
It's reaching something that you don't know what's there till you've got to, you know, so it's like you're scrabbling around and sort of finding it, so, you know, you need to go through that process to get to that.
Yeah. Because after all, you know, making art is artifice. You know, it's you know, if you left all the brushes in the garden, they wouldn't do anything. They just rot. So you know, you have to do something, don't you? And it's not life. It's not natural. It's not any of those things. It's a construction. And you know, it's really important that I think. To me, it's important that the artist goes through that construction as rigorously, in whichever way that means to them, as is possible. And as you say, you know, unfortunately, you do see a lot of work where shortcut, where you know that you can do this, you know that if you do this, or you know, you get a jump, or you get a this, or you get a that. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes, you know, you need it.
Sometimes the mission is helpful.
Yeah,
you know, helpful
yeah.
in the
But you shouldn't. But you know, too much. A lot of work seems to rely on that sort of jump or that jerk. And well, personally, I'm not interested. I find it boring. And you know, life is too short. It's that boring. Shall we carry on, or are there any questions?
How about I'm sorry to hold this, but another connection is the sort of relatively the central motif in the three of your work, just becoming apparent looking around, which I've never thought about any of your work before. Is that something you was?
No, I think that's something that almost like it's the you notice it when we put the show up. Actually,
We talk about quite a lot of composition in that.
Yeah.
When we do studio visits, Howard says to me, you know, the idea of shifting slightly to the side, what would that do? I mean, that one of the chair, you know, I suppose I was shifting it to the side, so it wasn't so central, but yeah, I mean, it's something I've always avoided symmetry, but suddenly I'm making symmetrical paintings, but I suppose it doesn't really bother me now. I don't know anymore. It's more to do with, you know, the space twisting out and punching out and all these things happening, but it doesn't, you know, maybe it needs some sort of structure. Symmetry is one thing that is stable and the rest can do its thing. But I suppose that one with the chair was the only one I was suddenly thinking about the idea of composition of picture space or a room or something, a tangible space, but generally space is ambiguous, you know, it's just, yeah, almost like theatrical space, which is, I could say that you have, it says.
well, I think what's happened with me is that in a curious way, again, lurking behind all the bloody paintings all the time is the notion of a figure, something to do with a figure, and somehow, you know, I mean, I spent 2 years painting flowers. About 3 years ago. I still paint them occasionally, but I mean, I started painting flowers because I thought, fuck it, no one paints flowers. So, you know, and no one's looking at my painting anyway, so I might as well paint flowers, so that's all right. So, and in a curious way, what happened was that they did become like portraits. Each painting, the flowers took centre stage, and then, you know, they died all me, and I carried on painting them, etc., etc. And I made loads of paintings of these, and then this central image thing sort of got locked in, and I don't want to say too much about this, but the other thing about the centre, you know, as soon as you introduce 2 or 3 elements into a painting, in a sense, it's a dialogue. Something's got to happen between these 2 or 3 things. So you've got to create a world enough to make this dialogue real. And then you're into the nightmare again. You know, what are they saying? Why are they there? You know, what's the point? You know, etc., etc. And so, in a funny way, you know, I kept trying to push other elements in, trying to make other elements take part in it, like do a crowd. But the crowd kept pushing out until in the end you ended up, again, a lot of the time with a single image. And so in a way I think of all these paintings in a curious way as single image paintings. I don't think I've ever managed to sort of like really make a painting that's, I mean, maybe the flower painting is more in something that I'm sort of also doing at the moment, which is like trying to create a space, non-space in a painting. Trying to make
that space between the flowers is really active and as strong as the flowers.
Yeah.
We was talking about
earlier. So that you get this positive, negative. I mean, and also the other thing is I make a statement. I mean, you know, 90% of painting is figure and ground. Seems to me, always has been, always fucking will be. I mean, it's never taught as such anymore. When I first went to art college, words figure and ground were actually used as. But, you know, basically that's what it's all about, that problem of figure and ground. And, you know, I think well, that's what I'm trying to do, sort out that problem for myself, trying to work out how you do that without necessarily creating a real space or an actual narrative or, you know, all those things which I am very still unfairly dubious of. You know, don't trust them.
What I find interesting about your work, Howard, is you also, in the studio meetings, you also said, oh, I'll end up my life by painting figures, I'll finish up being a figurative painter. But it's almost like the paintings you're making now, you couldn't do that with figure in a way. All this, the grids, all the experimentations with ground and colour, because I think your grounds are particularly quite experimental, because obviously you do painting, changing, all that.
Yeah.
But I think those sort of structures, colours, all that sort of stuff, I don't think, especially the bottom right one, I don't think you do with a figure.
No,
Because you don't paint figures like that, you paint figures, they're sort of flatter, and I think these have allowed you to make paintings, construct paintings in a much more sort of, abstract, figurative way.
Well, I think
so I always think that maybe you'll never paint, you'll paint a figure, but you'll paint around the figure, like suggesting the figure, or the shoe, part of the figure. But I think that's sort of...
Well, I think that's a very good point, and it goes back to this idea of lying to yourself, and I think one tells oneself these sort of like creative fibs, so that you can carry on doing the things that you're least sure about in a big way. But you're right. I think that even though I know after I've just painted these 2-3 new pictures of figures in the studio, and I'm sure they're crap. But at the same time, they're like these, they lurch after me all the time. You can't go around a corner without one of them going, save me. And it's like sort of like the old nightmare again. But I know very possibly actually what I will do is go back to flowers.
I mean, somebody really likes Kiefer, but Kiefer will never paint a figure. He always paints the spaces.
Someone like Maria Lesnick, who I really like. I mean, she somehow managed to find a way to paint figures that are figures that are always figures. I can't be her either. So and she was doing it for the whole of her life, right from the beginning. You could see these little glimpses of a late painting in something she painted when she was 30 or 25. So in a funny way again, I think it's curious. I'm interested in that in myself. As again, the storyline that we give to ourselves. And what tends to happen, of course, in the art world is this becomes mythologized. It goes outwards and becomes a myth. I'm not going to say very much about it, but I went to see the Basquiat thing, and it's all myth. It's all a huge fucking hype to me. This is massive myth being made, and everyone believes in the myth, and then no one can question the myth. So it's got to be that, hasn't it? And then on the least possible evidence, you've got people saying, oh, one of the most important artists of the 20th century. And you're thinking, head in hands, babes, this is like, I mean, I can't even begin to go there. So, but at the same time, we do it to ourselves as well. That's what I'm trying to say. And what you're saying is probably right.
Well, I think, Mary Lasson paints a very different way. Her figures are sort of flatter and, I don't know, there's not such complexity in the picture making of them, in a way, and I'd say yours have that.
But then another artist who I agree is like Leon Gollum, Leon Gollum, probably one of the greatest, one of them actually, the 20th century. His figures are so substantial, all those sorts of things. I don't know, Nancy Spiro, like fantastic artist, I think, they also managed to somehow do those things,
I was thinking about the symmetry. I was still back on the symmetry question. Why were there so many symmetrical kind of works, so many central works? I hadn't really thought about it before, to be honest. But in a way, I keep trying in my own paintings to not to kind of move away. I'm not so conscious of that, but the picture plane, trying to move things back into the picture, and for whatever reason, they seem to come forward. And that might be something, I think that might be something to do with, if you're working figuratively, just the amount of images which are shot on the front of the picture plane, as opposed to, say, in the middle distance or in the far distance, etc. Which I've always found quite interesting. It's something that's maybe to do with technology and capture technologies, photography particularly. With the advancement of technology, you're able to work very close up. And in a sense, that wasn't the case, 60, 70 years ago. You had middle distance, camera which you shoot in a middle distance. So it's a different kind of experience of the picture.
I think photography immediately gets rid of the symmetry. Most photographs aren't symmetrical. their composition somehow. A portrait might be symmetrical at the only time, but generally photography is not a symmetrical image. And that's what's good about it. It's kind of it's whatever's fitting in the frame at the time. And I think that's what gives it.
Symmetry is a weird one as well, though, isn't it? Because symmetry usually, in my head, and I've probably got this wrong, but symmetry is usually ends up being locked still. It's a sort of, it pacifies. Whereas, I think there is I'm grabbing at straws here. I think there is a symmetry which is asymmetrical, which is actually a balance of things that are not. You can have a balance of things that are not equal.
Yeah.
And what I think, if I have any notion of symmetry, that's what I like about it. So that actually, the picture is never passive. It's always kicking in some way, And in a way, like it's got to kick, and therefore it's got to have room to kick. So that if you lock everything in, lock everything down, you've got no visual tension. There's no visual tension. It's got nowhere to go. It can't say fuck off to you. It's sort of like want to do this. And in a sense, I think the painting has always got to say fuck off to you at some point. It's always got to want to do something that you don't want it to do, but it will do in spite of you. And then you'll find actually that is the thing that you quite liked it to do. And it seems like really important to me that it doesn't lock down. And I suppose, speaking for myself again, I stopped painting for 10, 15 years. Sculpture and all sorts of weirdy things for quite a long time. I came back to painting in the late 80s, really, because I just realised that I wanted to make images. I fed up with this processing. And now I've forgotten what I was going to say. So it's this idea that actually, within the nature of the activity, there's always this conflict, and that the conflict is something that's important. And I think that's why I said earlier that I always had this desire to make ugly paintings, and what I consider to be ugly paintings, because that seemed to me a way of giving a face to this conflict. In fact, actually most of the time I don't like the face.
The conflict's sort of paramount, isn't it, to the work's aliveness?
Yeah.
I think. We've spoken about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on one level, good art should make you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It should. On a scale of 1 to 10, it might only be a half. But it should never. So there's a difference in my mind again. Words. There's a difference in my mind between beauty and elegance. It seems to me that on a very vast level, beauty always has a dark side. It always has something creeping around the edges of it, even if it's the opposite. The notion. Elegance is a piss fucking place to be. No one wants to be elegant. It's like and too much art is elegant. It seems to me. It aims elegance because then actually there's no disturbance in it.
No, it's better than your fuck off thing's much better, I think.
Yeah.
No, but when Howard said fuck off thing, I think it's a great thing to describe painting. The painting tells you fuck off, and it's a really interesting thing to think about with painting. You're not sort of pleasing people, you're not trying to sort of make this aesthetic or formal, all that, but the idea that the painting's like grabbing you, and this fuck off's a good thing to think about. I think it's a good way of thinking about painting. And, when you said that to me, I hadn't thought about it, but I think it's a good sentence to sort of kind of reflect on.
I think going back to Howard's figure ground, never spoken about. Figure ground is a kind of conflict and a kind of tension, as is linear difference, contrast, tonal tension. That's what kind of creates, textual tension, factual painting.
Yeah, and if you're painting, if you are painting literally, and I put this up here, if you are painting sort of like flat, balanced, pattern-orientated paintings, you don't have any of that. You don't even have to go there. Everything fits neatly, everything slides into place, everything could be interesting. All those sorts of things. It could be this, and it could be that. I'm so fucked off with art that could be things. I want art to be something, really, even if you don't know what it is.
You got tired of apologising, I think sometimes.
Yeah, not even apologising, but tired of sort of like feeling as if like wanting paintings to have a strong identity is wrong in some way. That somehow it's you're overstepping the mark. in some curious way, being rude, you know. And well, you know.
How do you know when it's finished?
How do I know when it's finished?
Yeah, because
Oh.
all the conversation you've been having
Yeah.
so far has been about the fight and they're telling you to fight
Yeah.
off and
Yeah.
building balance and, you know,
Yeah.
follow up. And so how do you know when to stop?
Well, I think that we've all mentioned this at some point. I think when the painting tells you to fuck off, when it tells you to move away, when the painting actually says to you, no, stop. You know, there's no more now. Anything you do now is going to fuck up everything you've done. And sometimes you do that. And the only way you learn not to do that is by doing that and thinking, oh shit, you know. But and then there's not one way to stop a painting, is there? Everyone has their own ways of stopping a painting. Depends what sort of painting you make. You know, I mean, I personally, I have this again, and now I have to put everything in quote marks. I have this idea in my head that what I do when I make a painting, and I try to describe it in the catalogue, is that I sort of like, you know, I go to the painting and I attack it for extended periods of time until the painting starts saying, oh no, go, no, leave me alone. And then I back off because, you know, and then I sit there or whatever, and then the painting either entices me back to it again, or it doesn't. And then you're back in the same non-thinking relationship with it again. You know, you're back like
Trying to make it look nice.
well, trying to satisfy your. I mean, I know this is a terrible thing to say, I know, but trying to satisfy your gut reactions to it, trying to satisfy all your bodily functions in relationship to this painting, to try and make your body calm in relationship to the things you're doing. It's no, I never think about it. It's not a, you know, I want to sit down, have a glass of water, then all the mental processes come in, and then then you're in this nightmare again. It's like why, what, how, when, what. But the great thing about actually making the painting is it's the moment when the voice is shut the fuck up. You know, it's all quiet then.
I've just been reading an essay about it's talking about the relationship of the viewer and or the painter with the painting, and it talks in tremendously human terms, and it articulates the painting as if it were a person, or as if it were the person talking back. And I've just spent quite a lot of time trying to work out why that makes me angry, trying to how dare you? And now I've just walked into this conversation, which is entirely as if you're talking entirely about a painting that's shouting at you and telling you off.
But it's not really, see, sorry, I just want to say what, you see, what the thing is that you know it's not the painting, it's you.
Yeah.
It's you doing it. It's like a ventriloquist dummy to some extent. You
You're
know.
fighting with your ventriloquist dummy.
Huh?
You're fighting with your ventriloquist dummy.
Yeah, like all the
Paintbrush in his
best,
hand.
like all the best horror films.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sad, isn't it?
No, it's heroic. It's not sad. That part of it is heroic. Because again, I think that is a really good word to use in relationship to it. I mean, it's not heroic in the sense it's not saving lives or anything like that, but it's heroic in the fact that in the face of everything that we all know about making paintings or making art or what we do, to actually do that, to keep doing that process, keep doing it with that same sort of like, you know, sense of urgency and desire, isn't a very small way heroic.
Well, to tell you the truth, the essay was more talking about the end of painting, the death of painting, and what he's talking about is how you rejuvenate the dead body.
You don't have to rejuvenate, it's never died, has it?
Well, yeah, that seems to be saying.
I mean, I've lived long enough to have gone through the death of painting at least 3 times.
That's sort of what it is.
You know, and you know, it's like, oh God, get a life, you know, really. You don't, I mean, the thing about...
You don't have to resuscitate the
No,
patient.
no, exactly. You know, I mean, you know, it's always going to be like that. I mean, maybe painting, painting is, it's not the 16th century or 15th century, you know, painting isn't the place that people go to learn about how the world is or whatever else, you know, it's not the place they need to learn from, except maybe it is a sort of like fairly niche activity in that sort of sense. But, you know, thank fucking Christ for niche activities. They keep popping up and popping back. And one last word, I promise. You know, I always think of things like, you know, string quartets and things like that, you know, the music. Got the same instruments, the same 4 instruments, and anything from Haydn, Mozart, you know, right the way through to Shostakovich, Berg. You know, you've got these same 4 instruments constantly reinventing themselves, constantly making music that is in reference to the music that has been made, but is always somehow fresh. I think painting is exactly the same, and I think painting just will go on doing that because it's proven record that it can do it. There.
Whereas existence within the present is in painting's own existence within the present.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, and you know, we all know that 90% of it is crap. We all know that, you know, most of it won't last or whatever. You know, we all know, sorry, I would say something. We all know in a sense that when we make our own paintings in the studio that one part of us is heroic and the other part is staring at the dustbin of history. You know, it's roaring up alongside us. Oh, what's going to happen to all this? Oh, fuck, put it in the dustbin. You know. And I'm not being depressing. I'm in my studio at the moment. I've got the entire left work of a very, very good artist called Rosa Leach, who was a fantastic painter. He died in 2009. She was known. She had shows. People collected her. I've got the work in my studio, you know, wrapped up and packed in the corner. You know, this is what happens to the damn stuff. It's part and parcel of the business of why we do it as well.
And that's why we dedicated the catalogue.
Yeah.
Because in a sense she was the 4th voice in all the conversations that took place in Howard's studio. Almost that she was the watch were present.
Yeah.
Who owns her work?
Sorry?
Who owns her work? It's in your studio.
Her son. Yeah, I mean, she had a brief show at the Eagle Gallery after she died, but they could only show the small work because they couldn't get the big work up the stairs. And there are 6 very large paintings that, to my knowledge, have never been shown or only shown once. Beautiful paintings. And we tried to get them shown. We tried to find places to get them shown. Not really any interest. But, you know, I mean, that's just the way things go. That's the way things are. So, you know, someone will discover her maybe if you keep the paintings around. So I'm hopefully keeping the paintings around. But at the same time, they're in a studio full of my paintings. So that's not a good omen, I don't think, for what happens at the end. Anyway. Yeah.
Can you talk about the title of the show?
That's Nelson.
Yes.
There were many titles.
There was many titles.
There were many titles to the show. We won't go through them all. It had just seemed. I can't actually remember how it came about. I think we were just talking in a bar one night, and it was a song I particularly enjoyed. You know, Nacht Und Träume, and it's something that Howard knew, and it just seemed right for the show. It just seemed, you know, something that kind of encompassed us all.
Sort of a suggestion of atmosphere, I suppose. You know, nocturnalness. I think there's a sort of, well, certainly with me and Nelson, there's sort of nocturnal kind of airiness and I think, and dreaminess. I think, kind of. But also, there was this, when we did the studio business, we talked a lot about German painting. I think.
Yeah.
I think the show was sort of leading towards that slightly kind of the idea of.
And the song itself, I don't know if anyone's heard the song. The song is really about the fact that in dreams you have this life, you live this life, you do these things, and then when you wake, they're lost to you, they're gone. And to some, on a stretch of metaphor, it seemed to me that was something to do with painting as well, what we've been describing, this place where you go to, and then you come back to the world, and it's sort of only a memory again. It's a lost place. It's
definitely.
You know,
Creating a sort of strange sort of
other
reality or something.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and it was in German as well, which always makes it heavyweight.
It's got to be serious.
I wasn't going to say that.
It sounds good. It sounds good. It's got sort of like it's one of those rhythmic, think paintings like that, but it sort of
Yeah.
suggests things, and I think that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we did go through a lot of titles.
Yeah, we did.
That kind of-
And interestingly enough, a lot of the titles was sort of, we liked them, but I guess in some sense we dismissed them because we felt in some way that maybe on a funny level we might get embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
You know, that they might turn around and bite us.
Yes, exactly.
Because they use words like feeling and passion and anger and all those sorts of words that you thought, oh, some clever clock's going to sit down and go, and all that. So we chickened out to some, I think we chickened out in a good way, but I think to some extent we did sort of chicken out. One of the original titles was A Passion to Paint, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and everyone went.
It lasted a few days, didn't it?
But it's, you know, in a sense that's as good a title as anything.
No, absolutely. I think it really works. Yeah, that's right. Definitely. Yeah. Can confuse everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.